the personal conflict between Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Godswill Akpabio, and a former managing director, Interim Management Committee of the Niger Delta Development Commission, Joy Nunier, has over the past 2 weeks taken the shine off most news items in Nigeria, perhaps with a singular exception of the coronavirus pandemic. In the light of this, some frequently asked questions are once again being posed again, including whose interest is the NDDC created to protect, and what are its responsibilities? Political analysts have spoken about the NDDC in terms of geographic Niger Delta, consisting of states that are culturally homogeneous to the region, and political Niger Delta, which is an expanded version of the NDDC, including oil-producing states outside the indigenous Niger Delta. The ongoing agency, they say, is all about the geographical Niger Delta, doing everything to manage a wide-ranging crisis to the exclusion of key stakeholders from outside the Niger Delta itself. But how true is this? A mere conspiracy theory? Does a configuration of the NDDC, does it make room for fairness in spread with built-in mechanisms to avert the abuse of authority like the one being witnessed at this point in time? Joining us now to look at this angle of the story is Fafaa Dan Princewill, a politician, a public affairs analyst, and former Rivers State governorship aspirant. Good morning, Fafaa, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to have you with us. Well,
it's a joy to be here too.
Yes, very quickly, we would like to have your take on the crisis at the Niger Delta Development Commission. Is there really a conspiracy theory behind what has transpired in the last few weeks? Or this is just simply a case of mismanagement, lack of accountability, the absence of mechanism, rather than this talk about a geographical Niger Delta and what is it again, a political Niger Delta?
We must first take our minds back to the early years, to how the Niger Delta agitations led to some palliatives, including the NDDC. The idea of the NDDC is one from the federal government and not something that the Niger Delta people conceived as a solution. So from conception, there is dissonance between what the people of the Niger Delta were asking for and the solution that the NDDC is supposed to bring to the table. To complicate matters even further, the NDDC was designed in such a manner to have what you call a geographical and political difference. It's called the NDDC, the Niger Delta thing, but everyone knows that there are many areas that are not part of the Niger Delta that are in the grouping. What the reasons are for that, to have areas not part of the Niger Delta as part of it, and to term it still as a Niger Delta corporation. The idea, obviously, or the effect, let's not go into what their thinking might have been, but the effect, obviously, is to confuse the proper Niger Delta and the now political Niger Delta. Whatever the reasons are, it is clear that it's now time to have a fresh look at the entire solution matrix, the entire solution package for the agitations of the Niger Delta. Otherwise, it is easy to predict that we will slide back, if we are not already there, a lot of discontent. Because most of these palliatives have not met the ideals of those who set them up, and certainly are far from satisfying the needs of the Niger Delta. Year in, year out, large sums of monies are talked about, but nobody sees what they really have on ground. I think it is time for a comprehensive look at the entire Niger Delta quagmire. It is time to look at the problems fairly and to profile solutions that fully meet it. The NDDC is a federal government institution. Whatever people say, whatever dichotomies that they claim to have, it's all the making of the federal government. It's not, the commission is not a product of Niger Delta agitation, not a product of Niger Delta thinking, not the solutions that the people seek. And since the results are also not coming, it is probably a good time to look at it very well again. We are fully aware that in looking at it, there are those who will come to the easy solution that these things don't work and bring even more complicated and meaningless solutions.
Well, you talked about the solution metrics, and I wonder what exactly will that be? And what are your thoughts to those who clamor for a decentralized agency or commission? You did mention it's a federal government agency. They say perhaps if the states that constitute the Niger Delta region had a say and control of this agency, which is supposed to help rebuild the region and bring succor to the people, perhaps we would have that development closer to the people.
Let's get the facts straight. It is not the region that has problems. It is not the states that have problems. It is communities that have problems. The regions don't produce oil. The states don't produce oil. It is the communities that produce oil. The solution must relate to the problem. You see, what we need to do, and I'm not suggesting that you cannot have a role for the federal government or the state or the local government or whatever structures that Nigeria has found fit to put on ground. But by and large, when you have an oil spillage, when you have a terrain geographic challenge, it's clearly a matter of a particular community or groups of communities. It is part of the Nigerian refusal to deal with the real solutions that make for all these palliatives that don't work. It is not that they cannot work. It is that they are designed in such a manner that one suspects that they probably don't want them to work. Because centralization is not a solution to communal problems. If you have a central authority, it still must have and reflect the nature of the problem, that it's communal. That is what is missing. To complicate the Niger Delta by bringing in the entire national politics into it. In fact, you have persons from all over the country who are in the commission. And it's unclear what exactly it is that that is to achieve. There's nothing wrong in having our brothers from all over the country in there if there is a particular role that you feel a neutral person could play. But to just have these mixed match solutions. Even if at the very beginning, the Niger Delta ministry or even the commission were not popular ideas in the Niger Delta at all. In fact, they were rejected outright. But many of us played roles in convincing our people to accept whatever it is, meet the federal government, look at the solution that they present and see how we'll make it work. But it appears that it has been a mistake. Every single Niger Delta institution is in a mess. Whether it is, and I'm talking about the federal government solutions to the Niger Delta, every single one is in a mess. If you talk about the programs for remedial interjections with the militants, if you talk about just every institution, And that should tell us clearly that perhaps it is time for the over-centralization that the central government role is minimized. So I believe it is more than an issue of states or federal government. It's an issue of communities. Let the communities come together, and if they design a national body or a statewide body, it's more likely to be effective. There are roles for governors to play. There's definitely a role for a president to play.
Okay. I mean, you've said a lot about solutions, but as you were speaking, I cringed in my corner when you said it was about communities. I disagree with you, sir. It's not about communities. It's about the states, because the states have commissioners that are sent to the Niger Delta that administer. And another clear instance would be the 30% derivation formula. The states, you know, manage this money to be able to help to develop the people in the Niger Delta, but we've seen nothing. And mostly, when you look at the allegations currently in the Niger Delta, increasingly when they're saying share money, they're saying give this state or that state their own share of Christmas presents, of COVID palliatives, and the likes. What role do the governors of these states have to play in all of this? Because when you look at it critically, it looks as though the governments of states are complicit in not fighting enough for the Niger Delta cause. And when you look at the way the NDDC is structured, I mean, if governors raise alarm as regards the corruption going on in the NDDC, or even call for a probe, why can't we have a situation where governors of the NDDC states would even ask for audits, would even ask for constant meetings with the NDDC?
Yes, I don't know if you are from the Niger Delta, you know, but I respect your take on it and your viewpoint on it. But I will tell you, when there's an oil spillage, sometimes the very next neighbor community may not be affected. Sometimes there's a whole swath of communities, several. But distinctly, oil is not in states. Oil is in particular communities. That's a fact. You can't quarrel with that.
Why did two state governments fight about the Soku oil well?
Very simple again. In fact, that happens to come from my area. That's my mother's area. As one who contested for governor when Rivers State and Bayelsa were still one state. That was in 1991 at the time. I will tell you very simply, in fact, in the case of the Soku one, there's really no quarrel. It is a federal government decision. There is a quarrel. Bayelsa State does not argue that this Soku land belongs to Rivers State. There's no such debate because it went up to the West African Council, went to court, and was decided long before independence. So there is no disagreement.
State created before independence?
No.
We'll come back after the quick break. We'll talk some more. Okay. We'll be right back.
Very good. Very good.
Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us is Fafaa Dan Princewill, a politician, public affairs analyst, and former Rivers State governorship aspirant, who has been talking about developments at the Niger Delta Development Commission. Fafaa, before we went on break, you were responding to the question about the responsibility of the states or whether it's the communities that should be more responsible. Maybe you will continue with your thoughts on that. And then when you land, you made the point earlier about what the people of the Niger Delta want. Now, what exactly do the people of the Niger Delta want that is different from the NDDC model? Because people listening to you will just say, well, you are claiming that other Nigerians have dominated the NDDC, but we all know that the commissioners, members of the board of the NDDC, even since Umpadek, have all majorly come from the Niger Delta, or they've all been from the Niger Delta. Since 2008, ministers of the Niger Delta, from Ufote Kaite to Gozi Urubebe to Akpabio to Uguru Usani, have all come from the Niger Delta. And the question is asked, if your people have been in charge, and we are hearing these stories about pilfering, mismanagement of funds, is it fair to now create some so-called political Niger Delta and blame other Nigerians when even people of the Niger Delta have not helped themselves?
You've raised many issues. Well, let me try and disentangle them and address them one by one if I can. First of all, the idea that the NDDC, and in fact all the various solutions packages, for the Niger Delta are federal government conceived, federal government presented, and federal government in every way.
But Fafaa, do you want to land on the earlier question before I raise these other questions?
Yes, I will get to the earlier one. I think this one is so important that I thought I should address it first.
Okay.
I think because it's conceptual, we have to first place this solution, problem and solution relationship. I think that's very, very fundamental. If the federal government, in its wisdom, and I'm not talking about this particular one, but I'm talking about successive Nigerian federal governments, feel that they have a solution to the Niger Delta problem. When it does not work, when the solution, it does not seem to be working, it's only fair that they take responsibility for the results of their own decisions. What the Niger Delta people have asked for were quite different from this. So the responsibility of the difficulties we are having with this present solution matrix must be that of the federal government. I think that's a fair comment. Going back to the issue of the communities and the states and all that, I hold the same view when it comes to the states. Decentralization, many people misunderstand as being taking power away from the center, the federal government, and taking all to the states. That is a misconception. The concept of decentralization is to take everything to the level that it should be. If there is a market in a village, the government has no reason to control all aspects of it, whether it is federal, whether it is state, or even local government. Some issues should be allowed to be handled at the lowest and the most effective and closest point to the people. That's the concept. It's a very simple one. So we are not saying that we trust the federal government less than we trust the state, or we trust the state less than the local government. No. It is in the nature of things that some things are best attacked and resolved closer to the person directly affected. For the example we had, with the Soku between Bayelsa and Rivers State, I was just explaining that really there is no dispute between the federal government, between Rivers State and Bayelsa. The dispute is with the boundary line as drawn by the federal government. So it is the federal government that introduces that element of dispute because it is not as familiar with the realities on the ground. There are facts on the ground. Federal government cannot, without knowing and dealing with those facts, draw up arbitrary boundaries. Those are the complications. Very simple. If you take the Sombrero River as your boundary line, then you have to find out who are the people on both sides of the river? Who are the people? What is the historical? Who owns the land? There are many factors. You don't sit in Abuja, draw up a line, and when they take it to the actual place on ground, it raises disputes. Then you now blame the local people. That's wrong. I believe that any day you have the Bayelsa people and the Rivers people, especially those in those particular borderline areas, don't pick persons who are very distant from it just because they belong to the states. Because they will be like the federal government. They won't know what the issues are. Soku has its history, it has its land things, court cases, settled cases, and the people live peacefully for several decades. Then you introduce a boundary. It was the creation of Bayelsa State and the boundary that brought a dispute. So it's a very simple dispute to resolve. I don't think that, see, what the issues are, just going back to the issue of a community or state, the states are arbitrary. I don't think anybody can dispute that. The states are as arbitrary as Nigeria itself. No state has a natural boundary that is more natural than that of the federation itself. None. They are creations of the federal government. The communities are not. The communities are natural. Nobody created them. Nobody knows how. It is through the interplay of people living on the ground that they have resulted. Some of them may have allegiance to one group or the other, but their identities are clear. So I believe that when you have, like oil spillage, when you say oil spillage, there is no oil spillage in River State that is not in a community. And when you have that oil spillage in a particular community in Bayelsa, Yenagoa is not affected. It may not be affected. Yenagoa may have a spillage and other areas are not affected. So these issues and these solutions must be to, see, we must break down the problem, simplify the problem, then we can solve it.
Okay. Mr. Fafaa, very briefly as you can, President Muhammadu Buhari seems committed to getting to the root of all this and bringing corporates to book. As we watch this developing, we're expecting the minister of the ministry to appear today before the committee, joint committees. But is this a tipping point for the region? Do you think that this is what the region needed? And what would you be telling President Muhammadu Buhari, really?
I believe that Mr. President has an opportunity. I believe that every challenge, every problem presents a moment of looking at things all over again. He's the president. He has, he's the one who will make the decisions. I think the appointments that they make, if they remain, if the NDDC is not to be rejigged or reticked and it remains exactly as it is, then they have to look at the appointments fresh again. I believe that the appointment of the Niger Delta minister was a total misnomer. I think it was not well conceived. It was a political decision that had no relevance to what was actually happening on ground. In fact, his track was one where I would say that he was out of the mainstream of the Niger Delta. To now have him as minister of the Niger Delta was unhelpful.
So you want him fired?
He should fire himself. You know, I believe that the correct thing would be for him to resign.
Well, thank you very much.
I believe that is the correct thing to do.
Thank you, Fafaa Dan Princewill.
And the reason why he should resign is simple, very simple. I've watched his interviews.
Well, we've got to go. We've got to go. Thank you very much, Fafaa Dan Princewill, for joining us this morning on The Morning Show.